It's been a really exciting morning. I have to tell you guys that I'm really excited to spend time networking with you, getting to know you better. I saw some incredible data this morning. 16% of companies are using advanced analytics capabilities. Most companies are still using last-click attribution as their approach. You guys are the cream of the crop. You guys are on the vanguard of what's new. And I really connected also with Paul's metaphor of Technicolor, of how we're really on the cusp of a whole new set of possibilities. I watched The Wizard of Oz with my daughter just last weekend, and there's that moment, there's the Technicolor moment where you step from that world of black and white or sepia tones into this world of color. And I hope that we've got at least one Technicolor moment in this presentation where something new that you thought was impossible before or out of reach, just too hard, might now seem like it's really possible. So my name is Justin Schuster. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for a little company called LiveRamp. And what we do is we do what Tina was suggesting, is important to be thinking about now, connecting your data across channels and devices. We basically connect offline data to online data. We deliver it into odometry and some other systems as well. And as a result, we help you unlock the value of your data. We help you get more value out of your investments in odometry and other systems. And we help you, as a result of then using those technologies with better access to data, get better value out of the marketing investments that you're making. And I'm joined today by Brandon.
Hello, I'm Brandon Bethea. I'm the president of Adaptive Audience. And Adaptive is a technology and services company that's set up to help retailers set up their audience-based media and analytics programs. So take all the acronyms in the industry, set up your CRM, your DMP, your DSP, your DCO, all of those things. We help simplify that, put it into one strategic data architecture, and then help you activate and optimize those campaigns.
So you guys get a twofer. You get two presenters for the price of one here. And what we're going to do, the way that this presentation is going to flow is that I'm going to start with just a little bit of intro to this world of onboarding and connecting offline and online data. And then I'm going to hand off to Brandon, who's really got the exciting meat of today's presentation. He's going to walk you through a case study where a big box retailer was able to put all these pieces together and really run some very sophisticated programs with outstanding results. And then I'll just wrap things up. So that's the signposting for how things are going to flow. This is probably not news to you guys. It's a really interesting time right now. You look at the United States and just commerce data, and for the most part, there's huge volume of commerce, thank goodness. It's a good, growing economy. $4.5 trillion spent in 2013. And despite the growth in e-commerce, which we can measure really, really well, and we can connect to our digital programs, it's still only $263 billion last year. It's still less than 6% of the total, which means that there's a huge amount of offline data. There's a huge amount of transaction information that's out there. At the same time, we're shifting more and more of our budgets to digital. We're spending more in those media that we can measure and track really, really well. And so that's raising more of these questions, really sort of this very basic questions. How do I connect all this digital spend that I have to the offline purchases that are taking place? And that's very possible now. It's been hard in the past because of this concept of the digital divide, because really when we're out there as consumers, brands get to know us in a couple of different ways. One way that they know us is as a digital identifier, if you will. And so if you think about what's happening here on the left, I'm out there, I'm hitting media sites, I'm going to brand websites, I might be searching, and I look like a cookie to a brand. I look like a device ID or a user agent. And these are anonymous identifiers that we can track in some ways, but then there's this whole other world where once I buy, I become known to a company, and I enter this world of more traditional PII. I'm an email address. I'm a postal address. I'm some more known quantity. And along with that is the information about what I purchased or other things that the brand can figure out about me. And the hard thing has been to put these two worlds together, and that's essentially what LiveRamp does. We basically connect that offline world to the online world and deliver it into systems so that you can take advantage of that more holistic data set. And one of the key things that's possible when you do this is that you're now finally able to connect these two worlds, to actually measure the impact of online spend on offline purchases, on in-store purchases. And there's a few other things that you can do as well. One is this concept of CRM retargeting, where it's possible to actually take what you know about an audience, about your customers, create segments, and go ahead and take that information and bring it into your DSP, your DMP, and be able to use that for more sophisticated targeting. It's possible to take that information that you know about your customers and use it for lookalike modeling, so that you can actually identify common patterns that you can apply to new prospects as they come in and treat them with more personalized experiences. You can actually, excuse me, optimize search. How many of you knew, and this was new to me when I joined LiveRamp, it's actually possible to load up a set of digital identifiers into Google and to run some targeting programs on that basis, that you can actually either decide that you're going to bid more because on this segment, or actually suppress this segment because you wouldn't want to spend your money on this particular group of individuals. So that's all possible. And if you can take your CRM data and use that to define that segment, then that's pretty powerful. And the last here is this concept of site optimization, and being able to take what you already know about your customers and then give them a very rich personalized experience when they hit the website. So there's a process to onboarding data. I'll talk you through it just so that it's not a mystery. We'll demystify that. There's this set of information that we take from a brand. They'll have email information, they'll have postal information, they'll have transaction data. And what we do is we take that in. We on our own have built what we call a match network. So separately, we're collecting anonymous login information from this footprint that we have of data suppliers. And what we do is we hash all that information, so we never really know Travis@gmail.com. We just know a series of digits. And we take in hashed information from companies as well, along with the additional segment data. And so we're able to match things up in a completely secure, private, anonymous way, compliant with NAI and IAB and all the guidelines that are out there. And then what we do is we match all that to cookies and device IDs that are out there that other technology platforms have. And that's how we're able to be sort of the Rosetta Stone, the bridge between these different worlds, and pass all that segment information then into the systems that you guys use. So that's the basics of the onboarding process. And let me now hand over to Brandon, who can talk to you about how all that technology then comes to work for the benefit of a particular customer.
Cool, thanks, Justin.
Let me say this.
Take that. So the case study that we're going to walk through today covers the gamut of strategies and technologies and different tactics that you can use for online to offline attribution. But that's not really the point. The point is much larger than that. The point is that we're able to now apply the same precision and accountability that we're all used to as digital marketers, but we can apply that to the scale of retail sales. So when we first engaged with our retail client, they've got about 1,200 stores across the U.S. They had a number of issues. But what resonated with them wasn't a tactic and it wasn't a particular campaign strategy on one channel. It was the fact that they were going to be able to move their business as a whole. So they had been struggling with, they had a customer base that was aging and they needed to get new customers in the door. Those customers that they did have were very dependent on coupons and promotional offers that were eating away at their bottom line. They were built up on a traditional media model, so they had, the bulk of their media optimization media models were based on FSIs and newspaper. And both the channel as well as the model was in decline in effectiveness. And then also the retail sales report, so as we're talking with their finance team, it was really difficult for them to align that with any digital KPI that we threw out there, even if it were an online conversion, if it were a coupon print or a website visit, the numbers simply didn't match up. So they as a whole knew that they needed to shift, but they didn't really have the technology that made it possible. So when we interacted with them, these were staples of our program. So when we set that up, we knew that goal number one was to activate audiences for accuracy. So we knew that we could hit, that older demographic that liked coupons, but what we wanted to do was help them segment that out and say, let's give that coupon to that group to get them in the door, but you've also got a ton of other smaller micro segments of young people that you don't need to hit with that coupon. Let's build up that base. So long story short, we helped them set up an omni-channel customer segmentation. When I say omni-channel, what I mean by that is we helped align their CRM segmentation to a particular data set, and then we use that same data set to then apply for, to bounce our display advertising against, to bounce our website traffic against, but aligning that all to the same core segmentation data set helped align the entire organization. And so the KPI for that particular program was, can we increase the offline retail conversion rate? The next point was we wanted to optimize their media mix for efficiency. So, we're limited to the digital channels, but we wanted to feed in those overall metrics to help them optimize their traditional media as well. But for the digital, we implemented programmatic media and personalized experiences. When I say personalized experiences, that included all of their digital advertising. So we had dynamic creative ads on display. We helped them A/B test the copy in their paid search. And then we personalized the website and actually did A/B and UX studies to help them improve the website. So the overall metric for that was to reduce the retail cost per acquisition. And then we had e-com cost per acquisition, and cost per coupon prints and all of those things. But aligning that to the retail cost per acquisition, we saw a big delta there. There was a difference. So the goal for this program was retail, even if that meant that we had some higher CPAs for digital. And finally, we wanted to maximize the insights that we get from all of this data so that we can improve our efficacy. So just because we can do it once, that's great news, but how can we build a library of best practices so that we can continually do that and consistently improve that return on investment over time? So that's where we connected with LiveRamp and connected with Odometry to put in place the offline sales measurement, which is one product, and then the actual digital channel attribution program, which is a separate program but merged together is really, really powerful. And obviously the KPI for that was return on ad spend. Can we make that budget more efficient? So the space that Adaptive plays in is we come in and help the brands understand their customer database. So what are all the attributes of your core customer? What are the micro segments that you haven't really been focusing on that give you opportunities for growth? And we work to set that up. CRM onboarding process that Justin just talked about will help you set up your DMP segmentation. Sometimes that's the same as your CRM. Sometimes you want to vary that and make more micro segments for your digital. And then obviously the offline sales match. When we bring on the CRM segmentation, we then marry that up with all of your website visitor segmentation. So the fact that we know that this particular group is a younger demographic who buys a certain category of products, but when they come to your website, they're spending more time on editorial content. The power of combining those two data sets and then personalizing that experience, we've seen amazing results, and we'll get into some of those in a little more detail. As far as the prospect modeling, we take that CRM segment and the website segment, and then we bounce that against other third-party data sets. So in this case, we worked with Axiom was the CRM data set. So we bumped all of our website and CRM segments against the Axiom data set to get our lookalike models. And so then we target that out to make our overall prospecting campaign more successful. And we'll get into more of those details as well. So then we help the clients activate that in whatever channels that we need to. We play a lot in the display, mobile, search, video space, but we also do offer email. And then once we're driving people through those channels, we help them understand if it's this customer segment and it's this channel and they've previously engaged in the following 3 ways, then our new message, our new dynamic message should be X, Y, and Z. And then we set up usability tests so that we're actually seeing heat maps, scroll maps, A/B tests to prove out what's the optimal experience per customer segment. And then finally, that's a lot of data coming in. And we've talked a lot about architecture and channels and segments, and it's a lot to digest. And while all of these tools do an amazing job at allowing us to dig deeper into those data sets, we still need a narrative. We need that storyline so that we can all make sense of it, and so that we can give that to a CMO, CEO, and they can make sense of it at a higher level. So we pull all of that into this customized UI so that it's customized dashboards per audience segment. And what I mean by that is your CEO might have a dashboard, your data analyst might have a different dashboard, et cetera. But big data is big. It's very complicated, so I think we all need to advance past that and build those custom UIs so that we can make it more actionable. So for the audience accuracy, and again, that was to increase the conversion rate. By onboarding those customer segments, we were able to segment that out, and we took a pretty simplistic approach. One of our main goals was to drive new customers. We obviously can't negate the core customer base, so we have to keep them in the loop. But then one of those micro segments that we were able to help them define was this high value customer. So there was one category in particular that was 4 times higher revenue for them than all the others. So we obviously broke that out and come up with special campaigns specifically for that group. So when we're talking about CRM segmentation and onboarding, I know that there's a lot of folks that are doing that. There's a lot of folks talking about doing it. But I haven't really seen a lot of case studies out there showing like the actual lift. So I'm pretty stoked to share with you guys. When we do this, we saw a 300 times higher conversion rate, retail conversion rate for these customers. So if anyone's asking, does CRM onboarding work? Yeah, it works. It's amazing. It's by far the best targeting strategy that I've ever seen in my experience in the business. So definitely try to get that on board. The cost of getting that hooked up is still far cheaper than a lot of the other tactics that you're going to end up paying higher CPMs for. So it's amazing. Point 2 is the visitor segmentation. We had existing strategies set up for particular sections of the website. This is my promotional section, this is my editorial section, but what we did was work with them to combine all of these different interactions. So for an example, we would take someone that spends time on a particular category of editorial content, and then we saw how many times do they hit the weekly sales promotion. And we come up with this set of business rules that combined a lot of different interactions, and then we came up with very specialized messaging in those dynamic creative ads to appeal to that group. So the overall result of that, we saw a 40 times higher retail conversion rate when we compared that against our generic retargeting. And the third point is prospecting. This client in particular, when one of your goals is to reach new customers, you have to do a lot of prospecting. So we have a number of different ways that we do that, but the one I wanted to focus on today was more of the modeling aspect. So we hear a lot of people talk about audience extension and lookalike models and all of that. We break that into 3 main buckets. So you've got your persona profile, which basically means when anytime someone does CRM segmentation, they bump their transactional data against one data set, they see what over indexes, and that becomes their persona. We take those exact same customer data sets and we target those, and that's what we refer to as a profile. For the lookalike model, we'll take those people, those customers, and those website, the retargeting website segments. We bump that against those data sets, see what over indexes, and build that out. And then we've got a number of other ways to do custom audiences. So when we went after those new customers with these tactics, we saw an 80 times higher in-store conversion rate. And the reason I'm a big fan of predictive targeting, and I don't mean to bash on it at all, but I'm using this as a point of reference because there's so much talk in the industry about algorithms and predictive technology, which is awesome, but there's still a human element. We still need to analyze the data. We still need to set these up in a way that we're able to test and prove out which data sets move the needle and what does that tell us about our customers. And when we see that a data set doesn't move the needle, what does that tell us about our customers? So point being, there's still some human element and still a lot of opportunities. Algorithms are amazing, definitely use them, but that's not the end of the story. So to optimize media, obviously we engaged with all of the programmatic media across all the different sites and all the different channels, but one that I wanted to highlight here was this particular brand was somewhat sensitive to the brand safety. They wanted to be on particular kinds of websites. They had existing relationships with a lot of these publications for their traditional magazine and newspaper media. So we teamed up with those leading publications, and we set up private marketplace deals so that we could buy the media programmatically. We could target those CRM segments and those lookalike models on those particular websites, but we would only pay when they met those buying rules that we were talking about. And I also want to add on, viewability and brand safety was another piece of this. So even if we're on these premium websites, that doesn't mean that the ad's going to be viewed. So now we're layering on additional features for viewability. The overall result of that was a 30% lower cost per acquisition. And while that's a cool metric, the learning that I would pass on to anyone looking to do online and offline is these CPMs were much higher, and the cost per clicks and the cost per any type of website engagement was much higher. And us being used to digital optimization, we would initially pull the plug, we'd shift the budget. Because the goal of this is offline, we didn't. We had to leave it and see what actually happened in the offline attribution reports. And so what we found is what happens online doesn't necessarily equate to the same offline. When you're doing offline, make that your goal, stick to it. Don't shift it over because it has a higher CPC. It's a nice metric to monitor, but definitely not the point.
And this was a brand that drives most of their revenue through offline, right?
Yes.
And so this whole question of how much should we even be spending on digital was a big question in the air. And was it working, was it not, and which parts were working, which weren't? So.
Yep, 100%. And to that point, there's a lot of, in any organization, you've got your digital team and you've got the rest of the organization. If they have those existing relationships with publications, this helped bridge that gap and get everyone speaking the same language and looking at the same KPIs. So the next point, and Justin alluded to this, the search retargeting program. So within those customer segments, we're actually able to integrate that in with Google RLSA tags so that we can actually target specific audiences in our search. What we did in this example was we wanted to test that high value customer segment. If we can get them in with a special offer versus just a generic offer, can we move the needle and actually drop the cost per acquisition and increase the return on spend? The result of that was a 20% lower cost per acquisition when we tested that against just the generic without the audience segment. So this particular use case, it's awesome that we can do it and we've got positive results, but I think we're just scratching the surface on what we're going to be able to do with the integration of audience data into search. And the third point is dynamic creative optimization. So we did that on both the ads and the website itself. Within the ad units, obviously we get super granular with your customer, your visitor, and your prospect. But then when you start combining those into little micro segments, you really have to get to a point where you have dynamic creative in those ad units. Otherwise, it's not going to pay out because your creative team is just going to be working around the clock to crank this stuff out, and that bill's not going to look good. And then also you need to do a lot of A/B testing to prove out which of these messaging is actually working to these audience segments. Just because it's logical doesn't mean that it's going to work. So do testing. When we did this, we saw an 80% lower cost per acquisition over the controls. So we had generic creative for each of these segments and then personalized. And personalized definitely moves the needle. And I should also say, on some of those segments, we saw insane results. Like it was radically better, and some it was kind of flat. So it evens out to 80. We don't have time to go through all of that today, but you will see certain segments perform better than others. So then for the insights bit, I mentioned efficacy. So can we prove it out so that we can do it consistently over time? Some of the cool reports that we have in our adaptive audience interface will tell you, how are those segments performing across all of my channels? Which specific keywords and publications are actually driving offline sales the best? Which states and store locations are they actually going to? Infinite amounts of data, but the difference here is that instead of looking at that by a state, or instead of looking at that by your channel or creative, you use your audience, your customers and your visitors as the primary key to connect the dots and give you that narrative, that storyline that everyone can follow. So when you're giving insights, it has to be actionable. So the actions that have come from these reports, we completely redefined the customer persona. So when we got there, there were 6 and now there's 3, and the differences between them are radically different. And that goes from the CRM side, but then also we're monitoring all the digital behaviors on their website and off of their website to feed in more data. So that's really helped not only us from our digital perspective, but that helps the brand teams, the content marketing teams, and even to some extent the product merchandisers. Okay, and then so the next is where Odometry really comes in and helps bring this thing to life for us. We are able to look at the overall channel lift. So we see that when we use display and search, we see a 60% lift in the conversion rate. Funnel stage has been really helpful for us. We can see which particular tactics, publications, et cetera, are actually introducing those new customers, which was one of our primary goals. Another note on exclusivity and frequency is a cool report that Odometry offers that is the easiest way to save 25% of your budget anytime. And I'll get into more of those details in a bit. And then obviously the keywords and placements. When we implemented these, we were able to optimize the media buy, but then also the digital budget allocation. So now that we're proving out if you invest this money, you'll get this X return in digital, we're starting to see a lot more of that budget shift over to digital. So that's obviously good news for us. And 3, the creative insights that we get. So we're matching that up to your actual customer segments, and we'll go out and recruit people. If it's a 35-year-old female in Milwaukee, we'll go recruit people that look like that, put the ads in front of them, ask them, is this message clear? We'll target the test to that specific group and see how do they actually engage with the page through heat maps and scroll maps and A/B testing. So those insights filter back up to the overall strategy and then get down back into creative iterations of the actual units and website experience. So obviously the actions from that, we've completely redesigned the ad templates as well as the website experience. So the overall program results, and I really want to stress the point that this isn't a campaign that we launched and these were the results. This is a multitude of campaigns across 3 business quarters. So these results aren't a fluke, they aren't we got lucky. These are, we've proven things out and we're consistently seeing improvement month over month, campaign over campaign. The actual offline retail conversion rate here, we've increased that 40 times since we started the program in Q2 of last year. The cost per acquisition, while just anywhere in this ballpark would be amazing, but the fact that we're actually able to lower that 35% is awesome. The return on ad spend, we're now looking at around a 10-to-1 return. So this is the primary metric that's causing those budget shifts. And the fact that we're able to do this on a 1-to-1, that's the most reliable data set that we have as far as how to allocate budgets and forecast sales. We'll get into the media modeling bit, but that's all based off of if you did well before, then you look at those tactics and put a cost per or a revenue per impression. These are actually 1-to-1 matched results. So those of you who are looking to launch your own online offline attribution program, put together a few high-level recommendations. Number 1, in order to get adoption through the organization, which is absolutely critical, you need to align with the internal sales, the internal finance teams reports as soon as possible. And what I mean by that is work with them on their media mix, their traditional media mix optimization models, and look at how they're attributing or putting contribution to each of your channels. Without that alignment, you're just talking about digital KPIs again, and it's not meaningful and it's not relevant to the broader organization. That process, it sounds scary, but it's actually not that hard. But do try to align that as step 1. For your audience segmentation, do not use multiple data sets. It will only confuse you. Choose one primary data set and bump everything against it, your CRM, your website, and your offline sales. Media metrics, I mentioned this earlier, focus on the CPA, don't get distracted and shift to CPCs 3 days into the flight. You're not going to be able to prove out your best practices if you're constantly reacting. The media buying rules, I mentioned this, exclusivity and frequency is a really, really easy way to optimize that budget. We've consistently seen 25% or more, or saved 25% or more of our budget doing that. As far as the creative messaging, it's a no-brainer that whatever works, you're going to do more of that. But something that we've been doing is to look at what didn't work and why didn't it work, and can we create segments based off of that and test new strategies and new customer profiles. And then finally, the data reporting. You've got too much data in too many different places to make it make sense. So you've got to have one centralized source to bring it all together. Obviously, that's what our company does, is set up these custom dashboards, but in lieu of that, even a spreadsheet that ties it all together, get aligned on what the KPIs are and how do you tell a story with the data. And making a narrative with all this data is a little tricky without using the audience as your primary key. So quickly, I need to wrap up here. What's coming next for us? We're doing all these optimizations offline to online, but I'm really excited that for the next quarter we're going to implement, Xometry has a product called RTB Connector that's actually going to integrate that data feed directly into our programmatic platform so that we can optimize in real time. Two, we continue to work with aligning media mix modeling with the actual channel attribution, but we're looking to move to, Xometry has Market View now, which is the media modeling side of the business, so I think there's going to be a lot of integrations that help us make sense of all that different data. We are on a quest to improve viewability, so we're already doing that today, but we've got a new partnership with Integral, so we're going to be able to offer our clients a lot more visibility into those metrics. We're now infusing competitive scorecards into our overall dashboard so that you can pick your top 3 competitors and bounce your metrics of what are you spending in search and display against what they're spending. We've got some qualitative metrics that we'll go through and analyze the messaging that you're doing in market next to them, offers, things like that. We're really excited that we're working on launching a pilot programmatic TV. So as we talk about the convergence of traditional and digital, I think this is something that is really exciting for us. Being able to target those audiences and measure it with accountability, I think will be a bigger deal probably in the next 6 months or so. And then finally, the cross-device campaigns. And Justin is going to talk a little bit about the cross-device, but in essence, we have this data sitting with LiveRamp already, and we're going to start activating new campaigns and new strategies against that. So with that said.
So wow, I mean, that's an amazing story and incredible results, and just a perfect example of, I think, what's achievable when you're putting all these technologies together and using the data for strategic advantage. Brandon touched on cross-device as being one of the next things that he's looking at with this particular customer, and that's been a pretty hot area for us as well. We've been making a lot of investments to get beyond not only connecting offline and online, but to this sort of next level of complexity, which is as we are increasingly using more devices. Nielsen just put out a report a few months ago that says on average Americans have 4 devices. And Google did research recently that said about 2/3 of us are making purchase decisions, we're buying things, and we're using multiple devices in that purchase pathway. And I'm sure all of you are seeing the numbers that are out there that are just showing this meteoric increase in spend for mobile advertising that's taking place and what those projections look like. And so that's, of course, causing people to start thinking about, well, how do I start thinking about a cross-device world? Boy, it was like hard enough when I was just thinking Omni-Channel and all these different other things, but now I have to think about all the permutations that exist when not only am I trying to reach a person, but that person is actually also a series of digital identifiers, and those identifiers are mapped to multiple devices. That gets pretty complicated. But if you can put the pieces together, now you can actually start to see when people start a shopping process on one device and finish it on another, you can do the proper attribution for that. You can actually start thinking about more cross-device sequential targeting strategies. Maybe somebody puts something into a shopping cart on a smartphone, and you want to make sure that you reach them the next time they're online. That happens to be on a PC or on a tablet. And how can you make sure that you can actually get that message in front of them and help them inspire them to complete that purchase? And then what about getting that optimization that Brandon talked about? One of those easiest ways to get some money back in your budget is to think about some frequency capping and some suppression techniques. And if you've reached them on one device, do you actually have to reach them on other devices too? So this is that next frontier that we're also helping companies put together, and we're working with our partners to help enable through their technologies. So that was it. I hope that was useful. I hope there was at least one Technicolor moment in there somewhere. And we thank you for your time. And we'll take some questions.
We can do one real quick question if we'd like.
My name is Brandon Wishnow with Ovative Group. My question is for Brandon. I think, although maybe both of you guys can answer this. With the journey you walked through there was, there's a lot in there, and I was curious when you kind of first engaged with the client, we're going to do all this for you, or did you kind of focus on one piece and then it was kind of building over time?
Absolutely break it into bite-sized chunks. We did come up with the overarching strategy. Blue sky, this is what this looks like. And we help them evaluate, activate, and then optimize. So there was a full evaluation period at the beginning when we said, we know that we need the following 10 platforms and 7 strategies. Here's how we're going to get there, and then we broke that into a roadmap. Step 1 was, let's just get in with the CRM, let's get in with your database and see what it is that we're working with so that we can figure out what is the right strategies. Align that with these guys to onboard that data, and the DMP was the next step. Then activation with the, the DSPs and the, dynamic creative vendors and all of that was the next step. And then we actually got into the actual website optimization and UX study. So it was definitely a solid plan up front, but bite-sized chunks. And it took us probably 2 quarters before we even got to the website stuff. So I think now that we've kind of got it all up and running, and we're looking, in retrospect, we've increased it over time, but we've been layering in these pieces. So now moving forward, as I mentioned, we'll start layering in, like, let's say programmatic TV pilot is successful, and then we start doing more of that or whatever. But definitely lay that in bite-sized chunks. Trying to take all that on at one time, I think it's too much regardless of resources. It's just too much to digest.
Well, one thing that you said, and Tina said it as well, is to think about it as a strategy rather than just attacking it as a point project. So you have to start somewhere, and you have to have that bite-sized chunk to begin with and show some success. But this is really about a new way of doing marketing and using data to help power that. So you may not see all the impact and all the benefits from just thinking about it as a single campaign and trying to measure the success that way.
Thanks so much to Brandon and Justin.
Thank you.